To the world, Maya was just the cleaner. To old Mr. Blackwood, perhaps she was more. When he leaves her an inheritance of millions, Maya finds herself thrown into a war against greedy heirs. But the money might be the least of the secrets in that silent mansion. Why her? Before we dive into Maya's story, if you enjoy mysteries and emotional twists like this one, hit that like button below, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories, and ring the notification bell. Now let's get to the story. The acrid smell of bleach mixed with the artificial scent of lavender was the olfactory soundtrack of Maya Alvarez's life. At 5 in the morning, while the city still breathed the cold silence of dawn, she was already up, preparing strong instant coffee in her tiny kitchen. The rented apartment on the 3rd floor of an old elevatorless building was small, almost claustrophobic, but it was her refuge, the only place she could let her guard down after hours of scrubbing, polishing, and sweeping away the remnants of other people's lives. At 32, Maya collected cleaning jobs. There were 3 regular houses during the week, and on Saturdays, commercial offices needing a deep clean. Sunday was her only real day off, usually spent with her grandmother, Elena, in a nearby neighborhood, sharing a simple stew and the small victories and frustrations of the week. Life was a sequence of crowded buses, cleaning products that irritated her hands despite the gloves, a constant ache in her lower back, and a bank account that stubbornly flirted dangerously close to zero before each payday. Dreams? There were few buried under the pressing need to pay rent and bills. Maybe one day, perhaps a small cafe, a cozy place with books and the smell of homemade cake, but that seemed as distant as the moon. Among her weekly clients, there was Mrs. Henderson with her fragile knickknacks and meticulous demands. The Miller family, chaotic and noisy, where she always found toys under the furniture and mysterious stains on the carpets. And there was Mr. Blackwood. Arthur Blackwood was different. His house, an imposing but outwardly neglected Victorian mansion in one of the city's oldest and wealthiest neighborhoods, felt like a portal to another time. Inside, however, thanks to Maya's weekly visits on Tuesdays and Fridays, it was impeccably clean, though somber and silent. Mr. Blackwood was a man in his 80s, extremely reclusive. Maya rarely saw him. He usually stayed confined to his library overflowing with books or his upstairs bedroom. Instructions were left in writing on a notepad in the kitchen. Dust the living room, vacuum the upstairs hallway, do not touch the papers on the desk. At first, interaction was minimal. Maya would arrive, clean methodically for 4 hours and leave, placing the key under the fern pot on the back porch. Payment was made via bank transfer punctually, but over time, something subtle changed. Maya, with her observant and empathetic nature, began to notice the loneliness emanating from the house. From Mr. Blackwood himself, in the rare moments she glimpsed him. A tall, stooped figure, with unkempt white hair, and eyes lost in some inner distance. She started leaving small gestures of care beyond the strict cleaning, a cup of hot tea left on the small table beside his favorite armchair in the library before she left. A single flower from the neglected front garden placed in a water glass in the kitchen. One day he was in the library when she arrived, which was unusual. He was staring intently at an old ship model inside a bottle on the mantelpiece. Maya quietly began dusting the high shelves. "They require patience," he said suddenly, his voice raspy from disuse. "Building something like that piece by piece within such narrow confines." Maya stopped, surprised he had initiated conversation. "It's very beautiful, sir." He didn't answer directly, just kept looking at the ship. Patience and a clear vision of what one wants to achieve in the end, things many people lack. After that, their interactions, though still rare and brief, became slightly less impersonal. He would sometimes comment on the weather or ask if the traffic was bad. Once he found her looking at a shelf of literary classics and asked dryly, "Do you read, girl?" "When I have time, sir. I like stories," Maya replied. The following week, an old worn copy of Great Expectations was on the kitchen table with a note. "Take it. I have read it many times." Maya felt an unexpected warmth. She never asked about family, about visitors. The house was always silent, except for the creaks of old wood and the sound of her own movements. She knew, from rumors heard from other workers in the neighborhood or the occasional mail she saw, that he had family, nieces, nephews, perhaps a distant son or daughter, but no one seemed to visit. To Maya, he was Mr. Blackwood, her reclusive client, a man shrouded in loneliness and mystery, whom she treated with the respect and kindness she felt any human being deserved, regardless of their wealth or eccentricity. She expected nothing in return beyond the punctual payment for her work. The last Friday she saw him, something felt different. He was sitting in the library armchair, his gaze more distant than usual. Maya left his customary tea on the side table. "Thank you, Maya," he murmured without looking directly at her. It was rare for him to use her name. "You've been consistent." "Just doing my job, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, sensing a strange melancholy in the air. "Are you all right, sir?" He took a long time to answer. "I'm tired, girl. Very tired of waiting." Waiting for what? She didn't ask. She respected his silence and finished her tasks. As she left, placing the key in its usual spot, an indefinable feeling of farewell accompanied her on the bus ride home. The following Tuesday, Maya arrived at the Blackwood mansion at her usual time. She found it odd not to find the note with instructions in the kitchen. The house was quieter than ever, a heavy, almost oppressive silence. She called out for Mr. Blackwood a few times with no response. Hesitantly, she climbed the stairs to his bedroom hallway, something she never did. The door was slightly ajar. Heart in her throat, she knocked lightly. No sound. She pushed the door open a little further and saw him. He was lying in bed, seemingly sleeping peacefully, but there was an absolute stillness about him, an immobility that chilled Maya's blood. She backed away, hands trembling uncontrollably, a sudden nausea rising in her throat. The silence of the mansion seemed to swallow her whole. With clumsy fingers, she pulled her prepaid cell phone from her apron pocket and dialed emergency services, her voice failing as she tried to explain the situation to the operator on the other end. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their efficient, uniformed presence shattering the funereal quiet of the house. They quickly confirmed what Maya already feared in her heart. Arthur Blackwood had passed away in his sleep, likely several hours earlier, from apparently natural causes. The police were called, as was standard protocol in cases of unattended death. 2 officers entered the house, their faces serious, their boots loud on the old floorboards. Maya, feeling like an intruder in a tragedy that wasn't hers, but of which she had become an unwilling witness, answered their questions as best she could. She explained who she was, the cleaner, how long she had worked there, how and when she had found him. A tired-faced detective named Miller took down her contact details in a small notebook, his gaze sweeping over Maya with a mixture of professionalism and perhaps a flicker of curiosity. "We'll be in touch if we need anything further, Miss Alvarez. You can go now." Feeling displaced, exhausted, and deeply saddened in a way she hadn't expected, he was just a client after all, but the exchanged kindness, the books, the shared loneliness in a way had forged a tenuous bond. She left the mansion. The cold key still felt heavy in her pocket. She stopped on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the imposing house that now seemed even more silent and empty. She didn't know what to do next. Her job there had ended in the most abrupt and final way possible. The payment? Returning the key? It all seemed trivial in the face of death. She simply turned and walked towards the bus stop, feeling the weight of the day on her shoulders. That evening she told her grandmother, Elena, what had happened as they shared a thin soup. Her grandmother, a woman with white hair and wise eyes, who had seen much of life, listened in silence, making the sign of the cross at the end. "May God rest his soul, the poor old man. And you, my child, you did the right thing calling them. Don't blame yourself for anything." But Maya felt a tightness in her chest, a sense of an unfinished ending. 2 days later, on Wednesday, while scrubbing the grimy floor of Mrs. Henderson's kitchen, fighting the persistent image of Mr. Blackwood's serene still face, her cell phone rang. It was an unknown number from a downtown area code. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Maya Alvarez?" a male voice asked, formal, dry, and devoid of emotion. "Yes, this is she," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow with her forearm. "My name is Jonathan Pike, from the law firm Pike, Sterling & Associates. I represent the legal interests and am the executor of the estate of the late Mr. Arthur Blackwood. I understand you were in his employ. Yes, sir. I was his cleaner. Maya confirmed, her heart starting to beat a little faster. Maybe it was about the final payment. I see Mr. Blackwood left very specific instructions. We would require you to attend our offices tomorrow, Thursday, at 10 o'clock in the morning for the formal reading of his last will and testament. Maya frowned, confusion overwhelming her. She stopped scrubbing. The reading of the will. But why would I need to be there? I was just his cleaner. There was an almost imperceptible pause on the other end. Mr. Blackwood was quite explicit in his instructions that you be present. It is a legal requirement for us to proceed. Please bring a valid photo identification. The address is 1 Financial Plaza, Suite 3500. Can you confirm your attendance? Stunned, Maya mumbled a yes. The lawyer thanked her curtly and hung up. She stood there, mop in hand, the strong smell of cleaning chemicals in the air, feeling a chill in her stomach that had nothing to do with the draft from the window. A will reading. Her. It made no sense at all. She remembered her grandmother's words, "Rich people are sometimes complicated." She told her about the call that night. Eleanor frowned, worried. A will? Be careful, Maya. This might not be good. Go fulfill the old man's wish, but keep your eyes open and your mouth shut. The next morning, Maya rummaged through her small wardrobe. She chose the best outfit she owned, simple black slacks, well pressed, and a light blue cotton blouse she usually saved for church or rare special occasions. She tied her dark wavy hair into a neat low bun. Looking at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror, she saw a tired woman with faint dark circles under her eyes, but with a quiet dignity in her gaze. She felt nervous, as if going to a very important job interview, but without knowing for what position. The journey downtown took almost an hour and a half, requiring 2 different buses. As she navigated the sea of hurried people in expensive suits, she felt both invisible and exposed, like a fish out of water. The building, 1 Financial Plaza, was an imposing tower of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the sky. The lobby was vast, silent, with marble floors reflecting the light and discreet security guards in every corner. She felt intimidated, just walking in. At the 35th floor reception, she gave her name to a receptionist with a polite but empty smile. She was asked to wait in an area with plush leather armchairs and expensive business magazines on glass coffee tables. She watched the people passing by, men and women with leather briefcases, speaking in financial jargon, exuding an air of power and wealth that seemed from another planet. She felt small, insignificant. Finally, an assistant called her name and led her down a silent corridor with thick carpets that muffled footsteps to a large conference room. A dark, polished mahogany table dominated the room, reflecting the recessed ceiling lights. Seated at the table were Mr. Jonathan Pike, in his impeccable suit and unreadable expression, and 3 other people. The moment Maya entered, all eyes turned to her, and the hostility in the room was almost palpable. Maya vaguely recognized the older woman from a photograph she had seen on Mr. Blackwood's library shelf. This must be Clarice, his sister. She wore a grey suit, discreet but obviously expensive jewelry, and had an air of impatience and entitlement. Next to her, a younger man in his 30s, likely Richard, the nephew, wore a designer suit and was looking at an expensive watch on his wrist with ostentatious boredom. The third person was a younger woman with platinum blonde hair and a tight dress who scanned Maya from head to toe with a look of pure disdain and morbid curiosity. Tiffany, perhaps, Richard's wife. No one smiled. No one greeted her. "Miss Alvarez, please have a seat here," Mr. Pike indicated, pointing to an empty chair at the far end of the table, isolating her from the family group. Maya sat on the edge of the chair, feeling the cool leather. Beneath her fingers, the family's stares burning into her back. The air in the room was frigid, tense. The only sound was the click of Pike's pen and the low hum of the ventilation system. Mr. Pike adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses on his nose and opened a thick leather-bound folder. "Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here today for the formal reading of the last will and testament of my client and longtime friend, Mr. Arthur Randolph Blackwood, executed and duly signed in my office exactly 6 months ago." He cleared his throat, glancing briefly and neutrally at each person present. "The will is quite clear and direct in its intentions. Mr. Blackwood was a man of firm convictions, as you know." He began reading some initial clauses, specific bequests to the local public library, to a bird sanctuary he quietly supported, the settlement of all funeral and administrative expenses, and taxes due on the estate. With each mention of money going out, Maya saw a slight tightening of Clarice's lips and an impatient huff from Richard. "And now," Pike continued, taking a calculated pause that seemed to stretch time in the room, "we come to the main disposition regarding the residual estate." He looked up from the document, peering over his glasses directly at the family. Clarice leaned forward subtly, a gleam of eager anticipation in her eyes. Richard finally put down his watch and sat up straighter. Tiffany discreetly reapplied her lipstick. "Mr. Arthur Blackwood bequeaths the entirety of his remaining estate, including but not limited to the real property located at 412 Elm Street, all investment and savings accounts held at Sterling Bank and Trust, the complete contents of the residence, including all works of art, antiques, books, and personal property." Pike took another almost imperceptible pause before turning his gaze directly to Maya at the other end of the table. "I to Miss Maya Elena Alvarez, residing at 18 Maple Street, apartment 3B, as a token of gratitude for her kindness, diligence, and quiet companionship in his final years." The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't tense. It was a silence of absolute shock, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. The words echoed in her ears, but her brain refused to process them. Entirety of the estate? Millions? To her? She looked at Pike, searching for some denial, some correction. He just met her gaze with the same neutral expression. She looked at the family. Their faces were frozen in masks of disbelief. Then the ice broke. Clarice let out a sharp, choked sound, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and rising fury. "What? This is nonsense. A sick joke. There must be some mistake, another will." Richard shot up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly on the polished floor. His face went from disbelief to a pulsing red rage. "Mistake? This is fraud. This little nobody," he spat the word, pointing a trembling finger in Maya's direction. "Obviously manipulated my uncle. He was a lonely, confused old man. She took advantage of him. He was senile, completely senile these past few months," added Tiffany, her voice shrill and high-pitched, getting up to stand beside her husband. "She must have drugged him, tricked him, seduced him somehow. She's a cheap grifter, a parasite." The accusations rained down on Maya, each word a stone, a blow. Manipulator, grifter, seductress. Her who barely exchanged more than a few sentences with Mr. Blackwood, who left him tea and a book out of simple compassion. She felt her stomach churn, dizziness threatening to knock her off the chair. She looked at Pike, eyes wide, seeking some defense, some intervention. He maintained his controlled expression, but perhaps there was a flicker of pity. "The will is legally valid," Pike stated calmly, but with a firmness that cut through the accusations for a moment. "It was signed by Mr. Blackwood here in this office, in the presence of myself and 2 independent witnesses, both long-standing employees of this firm. Furthermore, attached to the will, we have a medical certificate of full mental capacity, issued by his geriatrician, Dr. Evans, and dated the same day as the will's signing. There is no legal indication of coercion, fraud, or undue influence in the records we hold." "That proves nothing," Richard shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "Doctors can be fooled. Witnesses can be bought. We will contest this. We'll hire the best lawyers in the city. We'll prove this cleaner coerced him. You won't see a cent of this fortune, you gold-digging leech." Clarice, the sister, was now also on her feet, trembling with suppressed indignation, her face pale with anger. "My brother Arthur would never do such a thing in his right mind. He barely trusted his own shadow, let alone some servant. This woman must have used some dirty trick, some blackmail." Maya felt the walls of the conference room closing in on her. The air seemed thin. The fortune, the numbers Pike had mentioned briefly, which her mind was struggling to register amidst the chaos, were more money than she could earn in 1,000 lifetimes of cleaning. Felt unreal, a bizarre dream, turned nightmare. It contrasted violently with the raw hatred, the naked greed, and the poisonous accusations being hurled at her. Why? The question echoed in her mind, desperate and unanswered. Why would Mr. Blackwood do this? What secret connection, what hidden motive could possibly justify such an act, to throw her into the center of this furious storm of family resentment? Mr. Pike, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, abruptly ended the meeting, stating that any challenges must be made through the appropriate legal channels. He handed Maya a card with his direct number. "Miss Alvarez, please call me to schedule a private discussion about the next steps." His voice was professional, but perhaps a fraction softer than before. Maya just nodded, unable to speak. She rose on trembling legs, picked up her cheap handbag and headed for the door, feeling the family's glares like darts in her back. They followed her into the hallway and the elevator, Clarice muttering about justice, Tiffany making snide comments about her clothes, Richard alternating between veiled threats of lawsuits and direct insults. On the bustling sidewalk outside the building, under the cold midday sun, Maya felt the fresh air on her face, but it brought no relief. Richard stopped abruptly in front of her, blocking her path, his face still contorted with rage. "Listen here, you scheming little tramp," he hissed, his voice low and menacing, ignoring the passers-by. "This isn't over. We'll dig up your dirt. We'll crawl through your miserable life. We'll prove you're a fraud. You should never have set foot in my uncle's house, let alone dreamed of his money. That money is ours by blood, right? And we will get it back, whatever it takes." Maya just stared at him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion, his words cutting into her. She couldn't form a reply. Hot tears finally began to stream down her face. Without a word, she sidestepped him and ran aimlessly for a few yards, then slowed, walking quickly towards the nearest bus stop, just wanting to flee, to disappear, to return to the anonymous, familiar safety of her small apartment. But as the bus lurched through the slow traffic, carrying her back to her world of mops and bills, the family's words and the central question echoed relentlessly in her mind. Why Mr. Blackwood? Why me? The unimaginable fortune, which should have been a miracle, felt in that moment like the most terrible of curses, and the legal and personal battle looming ahead seemed like an insurmountable mountain for a simple cleaner like her. She was alone, terrified, and completely lost in a world that was not her own. The bus ride felt like an eternity. Every jolt of the vehicle, every anonymous face outside the window, every stop seemed to intensify the turmoil inside Maya. The unimaginable fortune and the venomous accusations from the Blackwood family spun in her mind like a runaway carousel. When she finally got off at her stop, her legs were still trembling. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment on autopilot, the key turning in the lock with clumsy fingers. Stepping inside, the familiar smell of her own home, a mix of cheaper cleaning products, reheated breakfast coffee, and the faint scent of mildew from the bathroom despite her best efforts, felt both comforting and absurdly inadequate for the new reality thrust upon her. She was no longer just Maya Alvarez, the cleaner. She was Maya Alvarez, the millionaire heiress, and the accused grifter. The two identities clashed painfully within her. She sat down at the small kitchen table, Mr. Pike's card cold in her hand, and stayed there for a long time, just staring into space, trying to process millions, a mansion, works of art, and the virulent hatred of a family who saw her as a thief. Why? The question throbbed in her head. She remembered Mr. Blackwood's small gestures, the book, the rare, "Thank you, Maya," the tired look the last time she saw him. Was there something more there? Something she had missed? Or was it all a cruel mistake, a whim of a lonely old man that had now left her to face the wolves? That evening she went to visit her grandmother. Elena lived in an equally modest small apartment in a working-class neighborhood across town. Seeing Maya's pale face and frightened eyes, Elena hugged her tightly before Maya could even say a word. "Tell me, my child, what happened in that fancy place?" With a choked voice between tears and long pauses to breathe, Maya told her everything. The reading of the will, the unbelievable fortune, the brutal accusations from the family, Richard's threats on the sidewalk. Elena listened in silence, her wrinkled face growing more serious with each word. When Maya finished, exhausted and sobbing quietly, her grandmother held her calloused hands. "Hi, Maya." "What a mess the old man left you," Elena murmured, shaking her head. "But listen closely. You stole nothing, you tricked no one, you kind, hard-working. If he left this for you, he had a reason. Maybe a reason not even he fully understood, or maybe a very clear one only he knew. But the family, abuela, they'll destroy me. They have money, lawyers. They have greed, my child, and greed blinds people, makes them ugly inside. You have the truth on your side. And maybe," Elena's dark eyes sparked with a glint of shrewdness, "maybe you have this lawyer, Mr. Pike. He seemed to defend the will, no?" Maya sniffled, remembering Pike's firmness in the face of the family's fury. "Yes, he said it was valid." "Then, call him tomorrow, see what he says. You can't just run from this, Maya. The old man gave this to you for better or worse. Now you need to understand why and decide what to do." Her grandmother's advice, direct and pragmatic, gave Maya a sliver of resolve. The next morning, heart still pounding, she used the payphone in her building's hallway. Her prepaid cell was nearly out of credit, to call the number on Mr. Pike's card. She was surprisingly quickly put through to him. "Miss Alvarez, I was expecting your call," Pike said, his voice as professional as ever, but perhaps slightly less distant. "I imagine you're feeling overwhelmed. Mr. Pike, I don't understand any of this," Maya confessed, her voice low. "Why would he do this? And his family? They hate me. They're going to sue me. I understand your confusion and your fear, Miss Alvarez. As for the why, I'm afraid I don't have a definitive answer. Arthur was a complex and very private man, even with me, having been his lawyer for nearly 20 years. He never mentioned a specific reason for this provision in our conversations, only his firm intention that it be carried out." Pike paused. "Regarding the family, yes, they have already made formal contact through their lawyers, the firm Corbin and Croft, known for their aggressive tactics. They intend to contest the will, alleging lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence. It will be a legal battle, I won't lie. They have resources." Maya felt her stomach sink. "So what do? I don't have money for lawyers." "Technically, Miss Alvarez, now you do," Pike said dryly. "The estate will cover reasonable legal fees to defend the will, as is my duty as executor, and should the will be upheld, you will have access to the funds." He hesitated. "My professional recommendation is that you do not yield to intimidation. The will, as I stated, appears legally sound. We have the medical certificate, the witnesses. The burden of proof lies with them, and proving undue influence or retroactive incapacity is notoriously difficult, especially with the documentation we have. But they said I manipulated him. They will say many unpleasant things, Miss Alvarez. Their strategy will be to attack you personally, to try to discredit you, to create a narrative that paints Mr. Blackwood as a senile victim and you as a cunning opportunist. We need to be prepared for that." Pike continued, explaining the next steps, the inventory of assets, the appraisal of the estate, the legal deadlines for the contestation. The conversation was long, technical, full of terms Maya barely understood. But one thing became clear: she was in the middle of a war, whether she wanted to be or not. "Mr. Pike," Maya said before hanging up, "I need to understand. I need to know why he did this. Is there anything in his papers at the house? As executor, I will have access to all documents and the property. We can arrange for your access to the mansion soon, if you wish. As for personal documents, diaries, we will have to see." Arthur was extremely private, but I agree that understanding the motive could be helpful, not just personally for you, but perhaps even for the defense of the will. In the following days, Maya's life turned upside down. The news somehow leaked. Perhaps the family contacted the press, perhaps an employee at the law firm. A local tabloid ran a sensationalist story with the headline, "Cinderella Cleaner or Black Widow. Recluse's $1 million inheritance raises suspicions." The article included anonymous quotes from the shocked family, painting Maya as a sinister and calculating figure. The impact was immediate and devastating. Mrs. Henderson, her oldest client, called to dismiss her services, her voice cold and distant. "I don't feel comfortable, Maya, with all this they're saying." The Miller family cancelled via text message, no explanation given. Suddenly her sources of income were drying up. In her building, neighbors who used to greet her with a nod now averted their eyes or whispered when she passed. She felt marked, judged. The anonymity of her simple life had been shattered, and the Blackwood family gave no quarter. She received threatening letters from Corbin and Croft, demanding she renounce the inheritance voluntarily to avoid further public scandal and lawsuits for emotional distress. Richard showed up one evening near her building, waiting for her to return from work. She still did the office cleaning on Saturdays. He didn't physically threaten her, but he stood on the corner staring at her with a contemptuous smirk, a clear act of intimidation that left her trembling. Feeling cornered and increasingly isolated, Maya called Mr. Pike again. "I need to get into the house, Mr. Pike. I need to look for something, anything that explains this." Pike, ever pragmatic, agreed. He arranged for the locks to be changed and handed Maya a new set of keys a few days later. "The house is now legally your responsibility until the contestation is resolved. Be discreet when entering and leaving. The family will likely be watching." Returning to the mansion on Elm Street was a surreal experience. The house was exactly as she had left it, but now the silence felt different. It was no longer the quiet of a reclusive man, but the silence of a place waiting, holding secrets. The familiar smell of beeswax and old books now mingled with the palpable absence of Mr. Blackwood. With a feeling of trespassing on sacred ground, Maya began to explore the rooms she had previously only entered to clean. The library was the most logical place to start. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with books of every kind: classics, history, philosophy, technical manuals on naval engineering, which explained the ship in the bottle. The large oak desk was covered in papers, exactly as Mr. Blackwood had left it. He had specifically asked her not to touch them. Now, with tacit permission and desperate need, she began to look. Most were old financial documents, bank statements, business correspondence from decades past. Nothing seemed personal, nothing seemed to explain the will's decision. She searched drawers, finding only stationery, dried-up fountain pens, postage stamps. In a deeper drawer, however, she found a small, locked wooden box. There was no key in sight. She set the box aside, her heart beating faster. Over the next few days, Maya divided her time between searching for temporary cleaning work, unsuccessfully, and spending hours in the silent mansion. She explored other rooms. Mr. Blackwood's bedroom was austere, almost monastic. A closet with a few grey suits and some worn sweaters, a dresser with basic toiletries, no family photos in sight, which she found odd. She found more books piled on the nightstand. In the dusty attic, amidst furniture covered in white sheets and boxes of forgotten objects, she found an old trunk. Inside, beneath baby clothes yellowed with age and some wooden toys, was a photo album different from the few she'd seen in the living room. The photos were older, sepia and black and white. They showed a young, smiling Arthur Blackwood, very different from the reclusive old man she had known. There were pictures of him in a naval uniform, pictures with other young sailors, pictures in foreign ports, and then, halfway through the album, a photo made her hold her breath. It was a formal studio portrait. A young Arthur, perhaps in his early 20s, standing beside a beautiful young woman with dark hair and expressive eyes that looked vaguely familiar. They weren't smiling, but there was an intensity in the way they stood close, their hands almost touching. On the back of the photo, faded with time, an elegant script read simply, "Valparaiso Port, 1958, Elena." Elena? The name hit her like a thunderbolt. Elena was her grandmother's name, and the eyes of the woman in the photo, they were disturbingly similar to her grandmother's when she was young, in the few old photos Maya cherished. Her mind spun. Could it be? Her grandmother had never spoken much about her youth, only that she had come from far away, from a country in South America, that she had had a hard life before arriving here. She had never mentioned knowing anyone, like Arthur Blackwood. Was it an incredible coincidence? Or was this the key to the mystery, the hidden connection that would explain the inheritance and the family's fury? As Maya held the old photograph, feeling the fragile paper beneath her fingers, she heard a noise from outside the house. Peeking through the dusty attic window, she saw an expensive car pull up in front of the mansion. Richard Blackwood got out, accompanied by another man in a suit whom she didn't recognize. They looked up at the house, pointed at the windows, their expressions grim and determined. The battle was just beginning, and Maya felt that the small photograph in her hand might be her only weapon, or perhaps the spark that would set everything ablaze. The pressure mounted, the mystery deepened, and she felt more alone and vulnerable than ever. But now, there was also a new, faint glimmer of hope, the possibility of an answer. The sight of Richard Blackwood and his companion casing the mansion from the street sent a chill down Maya's spine. She shrank back from the dusty attic window, her heart pounding erratically. The old photograph featuring her grandmother, or someone strikingly like her, beside a young Arthur Blackwood, felt like it was burning a hole in her hand. The name Eleanor and the date 1958 swirled in her mind. It was too much to be mere coincidence. It had to be the connection. But how? And why had her grandmother never uttered a word? Carefully tucking the photo into her pocket, along with the small, locked wooden box she'd found in the library, Maya crept down from the attic, moving silently through the house that now felt thick with potential secrets. She needed to talk to her grandmother, but she also needed more proof, something tangible linking that faded picture to the shocking decision in the will. She returned to the library, the room where she had felt Mr. Blackwood's presence most strongly. She scanned the overflowing desk again. Had she missed something? Her gaze landed on a specific book on the lowest shelf, a heavy volume on naval history that seemed slightly out of place among the literary classics. On impulse, she pulled it out. It was weighty. As she opened it, she noticed the central pages had been meticulously cut out, forming a hidden compartment, and nestled inside were two items, a small tarnished brass key and a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a faded silk ribbon. With trembling hands, Maya picked up the key. She hurried to retrieve the small wooden box she had set aside and tried the key in its lock. It fit perfectly. Inside the box, there were no jewels or cash, but more photographs, snapshots of a young Elena laughing in settings that looked like ports and ships, clearly taken by Arthur. And, crucially, there was a single folded document, an old birth certificate issued in Valparaiso, Chile, the mother's name Elena Ramirez, the father's name Arthur Randolph Blackwood, the child's name Angela Blackwood. Maya felt the air leave her lungs in a rush. Angela. That was her late mother's name. Her mother, whom she barely remembered, who had passed away when Maya was just a small child and about whom her grandmother had always been so reticent. Arthur Blackwood wasn't just a reclusive client. He was her grandfather, the man whose house she had cleaned for years, who had given her a book, who had treated her with distant formality, was her mother's father. The pieces began to click into place with painful clarity. His reclusiveness, the absence of recent family photos, the sadness in his eyes, and the decision in the will. It wasn't a mistake, nor a whim. It was a late, perhaps desperate attempt to acknowledge the granddaughter he had never formally met, the bloodline kept secret for decades. But why the secrecy? The letters in the book's hidden compartment might hold the answer. She carefully untied the ribbon and began to read the letters, written in Arthur's strong hand and Elena's more rounded script. They were passionate love letters, exchanged between a young American sailor from a wealthy family and a vibrant young Chilean woman who met and fell deeply in love in Valparaiso in 1958. They spoke of secret meetings, dreams of a future together, but also of the insurmountable barriers. Arthur's family, the Blackwoods, who would never accept a union with someone of humble foreign origins. The social pressures of the era. The letters revealed Elena's unexpected pregnancy and the agonizing decision that followed. Arthur, summoned back to the States by his family and pressured into his duties and an arranged marriage, promised to return for Elena and their daughter, Angela. But the subsequent letters showed the increasing interference from the Blackwood family, the difficulties of communication at the time, the lies told on both sides to keep them apart. Elena, feeling abandoned and fearing for her daughter's future, in a hostile environment, decided to cut ties, raise Angela alone, and eventually immigrate to the United States seeking a better life, changing her surname and hiding the past to protect her daughter and herself. Arthur, it seemed, had been led to believe Elena had forgotten him or moved on. He married the woman his family chose, an unhappy, childless marriage, according to the subtext of some later unsent letters from him, took over the family empire, but carried the shadow of that lost love and the daughter he never knew. Maya sat on the library floor, the letters scattered around her, tears streaming freely down her face. It was a tragic love story, one of missed chances, of lives scarred by family pride and prejudice. And she, Maya, was the living, previously unknown result of that past. That night, Maya went to see her grandmother again, taking the wooden box and the letters with her. Elena, upon seeing the items, first turned pale, then her eyes filled with tears she hadn't shed in decades. "You found them," she whispered. Sitting in Elena's small kitchen as the night wore on, her grandmother finally told her complete story, filling the gaps in the letters, the pain still raw in her voice as she spoke of lost love, the Blackwood family's interference, the difficult decision to shield her daughter by hiding her father's identity. She told how, years later, she learned by chance that Arthur lived in the same city, but never found the courage to seek him out, fearing rejection or the reopening of old wounds, and how, ironically, fate had placed Maya, her granddaughter, to work in his house without either of them knowing the connection. "Did he know, Abuela?" Maya asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Did he know who I was when he hired me?" Elena shook her head. "I don't think so, my child. I think it was fate playing its games, but maybe at the end he found out. Maybe he saw something of Angela in you, or maybe just your kindness touched him in a way that made him investigate, or simply decide to right an old wrong the only way he knew how." With the proof in hand, the birth certificate, the letters, the photos, Maya felt a new strength surge through her. She was no longer just a frightened cleaner. She was Arthur Blackwood's granddaughter, and the inheritance was hers by right, not by deceit. The next day she contacted Mr. Pike and revealed her discoveries. The lawyer listened intently, examining the documents with keen professional interest. This changes everything, Miss Alvarez. The birth certificate is irrefutable. Proof of kinship, the letters provide the context and completely undermine the claim of undue influence. In fact, they strengthen the argument that the will was an act of belated recognition. The legal battle that ensued was intense, but with the new evidence, the Blackwood family's case crumbled. Their lawyers, Corbin and Croft, still tried procedural maneuvers, but the birth certificate was undeniable. The claim of mental incapacity was weakened by letters showing Arthur lucidly aware of his past actions. Faced with the prospect of a public scandal revealing not only the illegitimate daughter, but also the family's past interference, Clarice and Richard were advised to withdraw their contestation. There was no apology, just a formal, bitter withdrawal. Maya was officially the uncontested heiress to the Blackwood fortune. The transition was overwhelming. Suddenly she had access to resources she could barely comprehend. The mansion she used to clean was now hers. The bank accounts held enough zeros to last several lifetimes. But the money, Maya realized, was the least important part of the inheritance. What truly mattered was the discovered truth, the story of her grandparents, her mother's identity. She decided not to live in the somber mansion. It held too many memories, some good, many sad. With Pike's help, she established a foundation in Arthur and Elena's names, dedicated to supporting single mothers and funding scholarships for low-income youth, especially immigrants, a nod to her grandmother's past and the opportunities she herself almost didn't have. She sold some of the art and investment properties, using part of the funds to realize her own long-held dream. She opened Café La Esperanza, a small, cozy place filled with books, including the copy of Great Expectations Arthur had given her. smelling of fresh coffee and homemade cake. She hired other women who, like her, needed a chance. Her grandmother Eleanor, now at peace with a resolved past, helped in the kitchen a few days a week, her secret recipes for Chilean empanadas becoming the talk of the neighborhood. Maya didn't become a socialite or a business tycoon. She remained Maya Alvarez, but now with the financial security and freedom to build her own life on her own terms. The kindness that had always been her nature now had a larger purpose. The money didn't define her, but it allowed her to make a difference, honoring the complex memory of her grandfather and the resilience of her grandmother. One day, sitting at a table in her cafe, watching the quiet bustle of customers, reading a book as the sun streamed through the window, Maya felt a peace she had never imagined possible. The journey had been tumultuous, frightening, but the truth, however painful, had set her free. The cleaner who inherited a fortune was no longer a victim of fate or others' accusations. She was the keeper of a story, the fulfiller of dreams, and the living proof that kindness, patience, and the search for truth could indeed be the greatest inheritance of all. The past was settled, and the future, for the first time, was a blank page she would write herself. And there you have it. What did you think of this story full of twists? Maya's journey shows that truth always finds a way, doesn't it? If you were moved and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to leave your like below, subscribe to the channel to become part of our storytelling community, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. What part of the story surprised you the most? Would you have done the same as Maya? Let us know in the comments. Your interaction really helps us bring more content like this to you.